They told us MASH was just a comedy, but behind the laughter were forbidden scripts, buried lies, and deaths that blindsided even the cast. Once revealed, it became clear this wasn't a sitcom at all. It was a war zone of secrets Hollywood tried to hide. Here are 10 truths that will make you never see MASH the same way again. Number 1. Radar hid a secret deformity while leaving fans heartbroken. Gary Berghoff, the beloved Radar O'Reilly, carried a secret he hid for years. If you watch carefully, you'll notice his left hand almost always tucked into a pocket, hidden behind clipboards or covered by gloves. That wasn't a character quirk. Berghoff was born with a congenital deformity affecting 3 fingers. In Hollywood of the 1970s, where image was everything, producers worked with him to disguise it. Most viewers never noticed, even when he was drumming, a skill he mastered despite the challenge. Radar wasn't just another character. He was the soul of MASH. The innocent, wide-eyed clerk who could sense choppers before anyone else became the moral compass of the 4077th. That's why when Berghoff decided to leave after 7 seasons, for personal reasons, wanting more time with his family, the writers knew they couldn't let him slip away quietly. His farewell turned into one of the most emotional 2-part episodes in TV history. Goodbye, Radar. Fans watched in tears as the boyish clerk finally grew up, walking away from the camp that had defined him. It wasn't just a character leaving, it felt like the show itself lost its innocence. The impact was staggering. Viewer mail poured in by the thousands, and critics called it the death of MASH's heart. Even Alda admitted later that without Radar, the tone of the series shifted permanently. Number 2. The Korean War on screen that lasted 11 years. The real Korean War was short. Brutal, but short. 3 years from 1950 to 1953. Yet MASH stretched that same war across 11 seasons of television. By the time the finale aired in 1983, the war on screen had lasted almost 4 times longer than the one in history. This strange time warp became one of the most talked-about oddities of the show. The cast visibly aged. Alda's face, young and sharp in the early 70s, turned lined and gray by the final seasons. Yet his character, Hawkeye, was still living through the same few years of combat. Loretta Sweet's Major Houlihan hardened with experience, but the war around her never advanced. It created the eerie illusion of soldiers trapped in a nightmare that refused to end. Writers leaned into it. They stopped chasing historical realism and began using the stretched timeline to explore something deeper: how war corrodes the soul when it simply doesn't stop. Episodes dug into PTSD, grief, and the absurd humor soldiers used to keep themselves sane. Fans began calling it the longest war in history, and critics noted how it mirrored the endless fatigue Americans felt during Vietnam. What began as an accident of television scheduling became a statement. The war on MASH refused to end because for its characters, and maybe for America itself, the wounds of war never really do. Number 3. The theme song about suicide nobody was allowed to hear. The opening notes of MASH are instantly recognizable, that haunting, almost melancholy melody. But what most people never realized is that the song had lyrics, and those lyrics were never meant to be heard on television. The title? Suicide is Painless. Written not by a professional songwriter, but by a 14-year-old boy, Mike Altman, the son of director Robert Altman. His father had challenged him to come up with lyrics simple enough to be sung in the original 1970 movie. What Mike delivered was shocking. A ballad about suicide as an escape from pain, delivered with almost chilling detachment. The song became infamous in the film, but CBS executives wanted nothing to do with it on television. They feared the word suicide would destroy the show before it even aired. So they buried the lyrics, keeping only the instrumental. That melody ran for 11 seasons, familiar to millions, while its disturbing origin stayed hidden. And then came the irony no one expected. Mike Altman earned more in royalties from the song than his father made directing the movie. A teenager cashed checks from a tune Hollywood wanted silenced, while the adults who feared it had no idea it would outlive them all. Number 4. How removing the laugh track made surgery terrifyingly real. In the 1970s, sitcoms came with laugh tracks like mandatory seasoning. CBS wanted MASH the same way. Every joke punctuated by artificial giggles. The creators pushed back, and for once, Hollywood executives blinked. They agreed to remove the laugh track from surgery scenes. That one compromise turned MASH into something television had never seen before. Viewers weren't told when to laugh anymore. They had to feel the rhythm themselves. A wisecrack one moment, the sound of scalpels cutting flesh the next. The silence in the operating room was deafening, and it made the comedy sting harder because it lived right next to the horror. Critics immediately noticed the difference. The absence of forced laughter elevated the show beyond sitcom territory. It felt raw, unsettling, and far more honest. Some even credit this choice as the birth of the dramedy, a genre that treated audiences like adults instead of spoon-feeding reactions. Not every country understood the experiment. International broadcasters in places like the UK added laugh tracks back into every scene, even surgery. Fans who later saw the American original were stunned at what they'd missed. The fight over fake laughter may sound small, but it reshaped television forever. It proved comedy could bleed, and that sometimes the loudest sound on screen is silence. Number 5. Alan Alda secretly controlled MASH. Alan Alda wasn't just Hawkeye Pierce, he was MASH. What most viewers never realized is how much power he held behind the camera. By the 3rd season, Alda wasn't satisfied with just cracking jokes on screen. He fought his way into the writer's room, pushed to direct, and by the time the show ended, he had helmed 32 episodes, including the legendary finale. That gave him more creative influence than any other cast member in the history of the show. Alda even became the only actor trusted with the entire finale script. Producers feared leaks, so the rest of the cast walked into those emotional final scenes completely blind. Their tears were real because they didn't know what was coming. But the control came at a brutal cost. Directing while starring meant Alda was working 16-hour days, juggling scripts, production meetings, and his own lines. Friends recalled him leaving the set physically drained, barely able to speak after marathon shoots. He admitted later that he sometimes felt like he was living 2 lives at once, one as the wisecracking surgeon, the other as the general running the war from the shadows. The gamble worked. Under Alda's grip, MASH became more than comedy. It turned into a cultural weapon against the absurdity of war. He won 5 Emmy Awards, not just for acting but for directing and writing, an almost unheard-of achievement at the time. In short, Alan Alda didn't just star in MASH. He owned it, and without him, the show would never have become the phenomenon that stopped America cold. Number 6. The finale that made 105 million Americans stop everything. On February 28, 1983, America stopped breathing for the MASH finale. Titled Goodbye, Farewell, and Amen, it pulled in a mind-blowing 105.9 million viewers. That's 77% of every television set in America tuned to one show at the same time. To this day, no scripted episode in history has beaten it. Streets were empty. Restaurants and bars reported dead silence as patrons stared at screens, some crying, some holding hands. Even New York City's water system felt it. Engineers later confirmed that during commercial breaks, the demand on toilets spiked because millions of people all rushed to the bathroom at once. The plumbing almost collapsed under the pressure of America's collective grief, and CBS knew the weight of the moment. In 1972, a 30-second commercial on MASH cost about $30,000. By the finale, that same spot went for $450,000, a record-shattering price at the time. For context, that's the kind of money advertisers pay for the Super Bowl. But it wasn't just numbers. The finale became a cultural funeral, not for a character, but for an entire era. People said goodbye to Hawkeye, Radar, Hot Lips, and the war that had lasted longer on TV than in real life. It was the first time television proved it could unify a fractured country, not with sports, not with politics, but with a comedy drama about a war no one wanted to remember. The night MASH ended, America froze, and even decades later, that record-breaking goodbye remains untouchable, a ghost over television history. Number 7. Trapper John and Henry Blake leaving almost ruined the series. By season 3, MASH was riding high, and then, in quick succession, 2 of its biggest stars walked away. Wayne Rogers, who played Trapper John, had grown bitter. He felt his character was being sidelined, reduced to Hawkeye's sidekick while Alda dominated the spotlight. After constant fights with producers, Rogers quit. And here's the twist. He'd never signed a binding contract. That meant he left without penalty, simply vanishing from the show between seasons. Viewers tuned in expecting Trapper and found him gone, replaced by a new character with no farewell. McLean Stevenson's exit was even more devastating. He had hoped for bigger storylines, maybe even a career beyond MASH. Instead, the producers killed his character, Henry Blake, in one of the most shocking moments in sitcom history. Millions of fans sat frozen as Radar delivered the news. Blake's plane had gone down. No survivors. For many, it felt like losing a real friend. 2 main stars gone in 1 year should have doomed the show. But it didn't. Producers doubled down, introducing Mike Farrell as B.J. Honeycutt and Harry Morgan as Colonel Potter. The chemistry shifted, darker and more complex, and MASH became even more powerful. Number 8. Henry Blake's death that shocked the cast and nation. Season 3. Fans were laughing as usual. Then the writers pulled a trigger nobody expected. Lieutenant Colonel Henry Blake, the bumbling but beloved commanding officer, was suddenly gone. Killed in action. Here's the part that stunned the world. The cast didn't even know. Producers handed them the script minutes before shooting the final scene, where Radar walks into the operating room and announces, "There were no survivors." Alda and Loretta Sweet were blindsided along with the audience. The decision was unprecedented. Sitcoms simply didn't kill off main characters in the 1970s. CBS executives panicked, begging the producers to soften the blow. But Larry Gelbart, the showrunner, insisted, "War is cruel, and this comedy about war needed to prove it." When the episode aired, millions of Americans sat in stunned silence. Letters poured into CBS by the thousands, some praising the bravery, others furious that their safe escape had been shattered by death. McLean Stevenson, the actor who played Henry Blake, later admitted he was devastated by how final it all was. He thought he'd simply be written out, maybe transferred home. Instead, the show killed him with one line of dialogue. It destroyed his chance of ever returning, and locked his legacy into TV history forever. That moment turned MASH into something no one expected, a sitcom that could wound you like a war story. And fans never forgot it. Number 9. Malibu Creek became a real war zone for the cast. Most fans believed the 4077th lived and died in Korea. In reality, the war zone was Malibu Creek State Park, just 45 minutes from Hollywood. The mountains doubled as the battlefields of Asia, and for 11 years the cast lived through heat waves, freezing nights, and even wildlife crashing their scenes. Deer wandered onto set. Once, a rattlesnake slithered through the tents, sending crew scrambling. The terrain looked authentic on screen, but working there was brutal. Summer shoots left actors drenched in sweat inside heavy costumes, while winter filming turned their breath visible in the air. An unplanned realism that only deepened the illusion of war. Cast members recalled fainting from heat stroke, trudging through mud, and treating the set as if it were an actual deployment. What makes it stranger is what happened after the show ended. Most of the set was torn down, but fragments remained. Fans began sneaking into the park to see the rusted remains of the mess tent or the helicopter pad. It became a pilgrimage site, a place where fiction bled into reality. Today, a plaque marks the location, and die-hard viewers still trek through the hills to stand where Hawkeye once cracked jokes over the sound of distant helicopters. For many, it's not just a filming site, it's holy ground, the battlefield where television blurred into memory. Number 10. The cast voting to end MASH and outsmart the network. Unlike most television shows, MASH wasn't canceled. It didn't quietly fade away due to falling ratings or network decisions. It didn't stumble into mediocrity or get cut short by executive mandate. Instead, it ended because the cast and creators made a conscious, collective choice to bring it to a close on their own terms. They decided when the story was truly finished, and they controlled the moment of farewell. By the 11th season, MASH remained a powerhouse, dominating ratings and commanding immense loyalty from viewers. CBS could have kept it running indefinitely, squeezing every last dollar from the franchise and extending the show far beyond its natural life. But the core cast, Alda, Loretta Swit, Mike Farrell, and their fellow stars, gathered, deliberated, and reached a unanimous decision. The stories had been told. The arcs were complete, the characters' journeys fulfilled. They understood that continuing past that point risked tarnishing everything they had built. Better to exit with strength and dignity than limp on into forgettable seasons. The decision was unprecedented in television history. Rarely had a cast successfully wrested control from a powerful network. CBS executives were furious, frustrated, and powerless. Without the main stars, there was simply no show to air. So in February 1983, MASH didn't end with cancellation. It ended with intention, with strategy, with a finale that not only shattered viewership records, but also left the audience mourning, astonished, and emotionally transformed. The implications for the television industry were enormous. It proved that actors and creators could dictate the lifespan of a series, that creative control could outweigh financial greed, and that walking away at the peak could be far more impactful than clinging desperately to the spotlight. So, that's all for the video today. Which of these MASH secrets shocked you the most? Was it Radar's hidden deformity, the cast's deadly surprises, or the finale that stopped the nation? Drop your thoughts in the comments, hit like if you were blown away, and don't forget to subscribe for more behind-the-scenes truths from your favorite shows.